Well, after weeks of rising infections, the Spanish government is also expressing cautious optimism. Despite more than 15,000 deaths, the number of daily fatalities has begun inching lower. But Spaniards will not be allowed to leave their homes for at least another 2 weeks, and schools will remain closed. The measures are hitting children from low-income families in particular.
Marta Arbas's most important tools right now are her smartphone and laptop. From her own backyard, she uses them to try to keep in touch with her students. But it's not always possible. Miguel Angel's parents don't have an internet connection at home, so until recently he was stuck permanently offline. A friend brought me over a few homework assignments. I can do those. But unfortunately, I can't do the other assignments because I need to be online. The only reason Miguel is able to talk with his teacher right now is because a schoolmate gave him a prepaid SIM card. Marta says that was great, but it's no long-term solution.
I have students who are really good, but they can't continue their learning. The government should be making sure that everyone has access to the internet and all students have the chance to take part in classes online.
Spain has some of the highest poverty levels in Europe, especially among minors. According to the United Nations, 30% of all Spanish children and adolescents are at risk of poverty. Internet access is not much better. Around 1 in 5 families in Spain still don't have a computer at home.
Isolation, social exclusion, problems at school, children from low-income families are especially affected by the crisis. And there's another direct risk. Government reports have found that the number of people infected in poorer neighborhoods is up to 7 times higher than in rich districts. There's a lot of discussion in Spain about possible reasons, but what is already clear is that a person's social status plays a role in how much the virus affects someone.
Marta stays positive, but the longer schools stay closed, the harder it will be for disadvantaged students to catch up on their learning. Marta can't wait to leave her home office and get back into a real classroom again. But many in Spain believe that's unlikely to happen before the summer holidays.
Well, Jan Philip Schultz filed that report for us, and he joins us now from Seville, Spain. So as we've heard, there are a lot of discussion about, at the moment, about inequality and especially why poorer people apparently are disproportionately affected by this virus. Tell us more.
I think there are many reasons that play a role in this. First of all, it's about living space. In general, Spain has very little living space compared to other countries in Europe, living space per person. And this means that, of course, little living space and a lot of people in one apartment helps the spread of the virus. And this is especially true in poorer neighborhoods. Also, it's a question about education. We're talking about a lot of minority groups in those neighborhoods that usually have lower levels of formal education and also a lot of distrust in messages of the government. And last but not least, it's also about the kind of jobs that many people in those neighborhoods have. If you're a cleaner, for example, you can't do home office and you're obviously much more exposed to the virus.
Meantime, we also have another set of challenges because the Easter break is traditionally a time, especially there in Spain, when citizens, they crisscross the country, they're visiting family. How high is the concern that people will ignore travel restrictions right now?
So far, Spaniards have been incredibly disciplined when it comes to following the rules of the lockdown. So I don't think that this will change now during the holiday break. There is a lot of fake news out there about people trying to reach their holiday homes. And there's also pictures of congested highways around Madrid. Madrid is one of the most affected areas. This somehow falls on fertile ground because in the first phase of the crisis, a lot of people from Madrid have actually tried to leave the city. But police officers have said that they have a lot of controls on the streets and they haven't seen anything unusual so far.
Jan Philip Schultz joining us from Seville. Thank you. Europe's finance ministers have struck a deal on a €500 billion bailout aimed at limiting the economic damage from the coronavirus. The measures should help nations hardest hit by COVID-19, as well as supporting companies and protecting jobs. The breakthrough came after ministers failed to bridge their differences in marathon talks earlier this week. Southern European countries led by Italy and Spain wanted the European Union to ease access to financial markets by creating so-called corona bonds. But the idea was resisted by richer northern states, including Germany, the Netherlands, and Finland. Let's get more. We are joined by Gert, who is following the story for us from Brussels. So, Bernd, tell us a little bit more about what exactly is in this very highly anticipated deal.
There was a sigh of relief in all 27 capitals of the European Union after the finance ministers struck this deal after 2 days of very fierce deliberations, and they gave themselves a round of applause on this. And Mario Centeno, the Portuguese finance minister, the head of the Eurogroup, said these are bold and ambitious decisions that were not possible just a few weeks ago. And the German finance minister, Olaf Scholz, said this is a good day for Europe and a good day for solidarity. The package contains of 3 components. First, there come 200 billion of loans for small and medium enterprises from the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg, 100 billion euros in a new unemployment scheme, and 240 billion euros of cheap loans from the European Stability Mechanism, a rescue fund originally created in the Greek crisis. And these loans now come without any conditions. The Netherlands caved in here, and Italy won, said the Italian finance minister after the deliberations. Altogether, 540 billion euros, the biggest package the Union has ever made.
And Italy and Spain, they were among these countries needing the most assistance, very urgent for those two nations. Did they get what they wanted?
Yes and no. They get this emergency funding, but the bigger issue is still to be resolved. The ministers agreed in principle on a new recovery fund, but did not agree how big this should be to restart the European economy diving into a recession. And they could also not agree how to finance this recovery plan. There are still Spain, France and Italy that say we have to issue common debt to do that. And on the other side, there are Germany, the Netherlands and others that say no way. So the issue of so-called corona bonds is not resolved.
Gert with a view from Brussels, where we have just had agreement on this €500 billion emergency credit lines. Thank you so much. Well, Asian markets have largely shrugged off that new EU aid package, as well as an ambitious new lending program from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Japan's leading Nikkei index shed early gains to close at a loss. Shanghai also lost ground on Friday. Investors were buoyed, though, by gains on Wall Street after the U.S. central bank announced it would lend directly to businesses and local governments, and after agreement on that €500 billion rescue package. But concerns over the rising economic toll proved too much. Well, German Chancellor Angela Merkel says that she sees signs of hope in the fight against COVID-19. Social distancing is helping to slow the spread of the coronavirus in the country. But Merkel warns now is not the time to ease the lockdown.
Deserted streets in the German capital, a common sight in countries facing coronavirus around the world. But according to experts in Germany, the restrictions on movement seem to be having a positive effect. The number of new cases there appears to be levelling out. But with a long Easter weekend looming, the German Chancellor has warned against getting complacent. We mustn't allow ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security. Instead, we should be really happy that more stringent measures aren't necessary. For me, this means that we cannot be reckless now. We mustn't allow ourselves to be lulled into this false sense of security. And I know that from myself personally. You get a little hope, then you gain confidence, then you become a little more relaxed, and then you're a little careless. No, we have to stay focused. The situation is fragile. Germany also announced plans on Thursday to increase domestic production of protective medical gear. Asian manufacturers are currently responsible for 90% of the world's production of protective masks. More than 100 companies have responded to the government's call for help. As a result, in our discussions about procurement and the purchase of personal protective equipment, especially medical protective masks, we saw the first steps of progress. Some companies that operate here in Germany are already investing in increasing the production of the material that's needed for masks. Signs of cautious optimism in Germany, but the debate over an exit strategy to lift restrictions will resume after Easter.
Let's get you up to date now on our latest developments, because Johns Hopkins University's coronavirus tracking website now shows that more than 1.6 million confirmed cases have been recorded worldwide. Almost 96,000 people have died of COVID-19. Yemen's internationally recognized government has confirmed its first case. Widespread poverty and 5 years of civil war make the country especially vulnerable to a severe outbreak. And authorities in Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, are implementing stricter restrictions to slow the spread of the virus. About half of confirmed cases are in the capital. Chicago's Cook County Jail is reporting 450 inmates and staff have tested positive. The jail holds almost 5,000 prisoners and is now one of the biggest clusters in the United States.
All right, now let's take a look at some other coronavirus-related news from around the world. Britain's Prime Minister remains in intensive care in St Thomas's Hospital in London for a fourth day. Boris Johnson's being treated for COVID-19, the illness caused by the coronavirus. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, who's Mr Johnson's designated deputy, says the Prime Minister is making positive steps. Well, the pandemic has now killed at least 100 doctors in Italy, according to the country's National Doctors Federation. The deaths include some of the medics the Italian government called out of retirement a month ago. It's also estimated that about 30 nursing staff have died from COVID-19. The International Monetary Fund says the pandemic's causing the worst economic fallout since the Great Depression of the 1930s. More than 170 countries are expected to see a decline in per capita income this year, an almost total reversal of pre-pandemic projections. Emerging economies and low-income nations will be the worst affected. The US jobs market is continuing its collapse. Last week saw another 6.6 million people filing for unemployment benefits, bringing the total number to almost 17 million. The flood of new claims is so large that some states, including the state of Florida, has opened up drive-through unemployment offices. So a grim outlook then for the US economy. Earlier we asked the head of a leading German economic think tank what that means for the global economy.
We have to understand that the global economy is so integrated, so strongly integrated, and the US is so important for everyone, for all European economies, for China, that if the US is not recovering, the rest of the world will not recover. So clearly, China is ahead of the curve, is where you see the businesses starting up again, production rising. But the US probably has not reached the peak yet. So here we are probably 2 months, 3 months behind what is happening in China. So this will mean until the US is not recovering markedly, the world economy will be in a difficult situation.
Conservationists say restrictions brought in to halt the spread of coronavirus could prompt a resurgence in poaching and other threats to wildlife. The pandemic has prompted Kenya to close its national parks, effectively ending its ecotourism, a key source of revenue used to protect endangered species.
It's breakfast time at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust near Nairobi. The organization calls itself the world's most successful elephant orphan rescue program. But now its work and its animals face a new threat.
We have closed our doors due to COVID-19.
The orphanage stopped admitting visitors last month when Kenya recorded its first coronavirus infection.
We can have up to 500 people here in just an hour. So that's an incredible source of revenue for us, for our operations, that we aren't seeing come in at the moment.
Normally at this time, they'll be out for the public session, which is no longer taking place until further notice. And that's why we just let them out and let them do what they want to do, browse, play, and enjoy.
The orphanage has also been forced to shut down other important operations, including its airborne anti-poaching patrols. Many of the animals in its care saw their parents killed by poachers, hunting their valuable tusks.
We don't want to die, we don't want them to die, so we just have to work within our means and ensure that everybody is safe and that the animals are safe as well.
But with no money coming in, and the eyes of the world focused on COVID-19's impact on humans, it's becoming harder to look after Africa's endangered animals.
Well, for the world's biggest religions, the coming days are usually filled with celebrations. Christians mark Easter, Jews mark Passover, and for Muslims, the fasting period of Ramadan begins later this month. But the need for social distancing means religious leaders have scaled back or canceled many traditional public festivals and celebrations.
Easter at the Vatican. This is what Catholics around the world expect every year. Tens of thousands packing St. Peter's Square as Pope Francis addresses the faithful. What will it look like this year? The Pope will say Mass in an empty basilica, and his address from his balcony has been cancelled. Worshippers must stay home. Highways across Europe, like here in Germany, are usually clogged on Easter weekend as people voyage cross-country to visit family. But this year, lockdown measures also mean people can't leave their hometowns or cities in many places. In Israel, the 8-day Jewish festival of Passover is marked by public prayers and big meals with extended family. But this year, travel is banned and observances must take place at home and are restricted to close family. Soldiers are delivering sealed meals to people in isolation. For Muslims, Ramadan, set to start in 2 weeks, is a month of fasting that ends with a celebratory feast. But religious leaders have said that people with fragile health should not fast this year. And several countries have even closed mosques altogether. To many of the faithful, these restrictions are heartbreaking. But authorities fear that allowing traditional large-scale celebrations to go ahead could undo weeks of lockdown.